She's still upstairs, Brad whispered, a smug smile playing on his lips as he ran his fingers along my kitchen counter, taking her time in the shower. He checked his Rolex with exaggerated care. You know how women are. I stood frozen in the doorway of my own home, grocery bags growing heavy in my hands. The man drinking coffee from my USMC mug wasn't just any man. He was my wife's boss, the one she'd been working late with for months. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made us both turn. Dominic! Sarah gasped, her hair wet and body wrapped in nothing but a towel. My towel, you're home early. That moment crystallized everything I'd suspected, but hadn't wanted to face. No military operation had ever hit me this hard. My name is Dominic Hoffman at 42. I've seen enough combat to know when I'm being ambushed after 3 tours in Afghanistan with Marine intelligence. I traded gunfire for engine fire and opened an auto parts store in suburban Ohio. Not glamorous, but honest. Something real I could build after years of destruction. I met Sarah at a business mixer 6 years ago. She was magnetic ambitious, with perfect teeth and plans for a big future in corporate marketing. I was still adjusting to civilian life, still flinching at car backfires, still waking up reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. We balance each other. She told her friends at our wedding, he keeps me grounded and I help him reach for more for a while. It worked. We bought a modest house in a quiet neighborhood. I expanded my store. She climbed the corporate ladder at Egypt Marketing. We talked about kids someday, but that conversation. Tian gradually faded like evening light. The changes came in increments, so small I almost missed them. Designer clothes replacing comfortable ones, new hairstyle, new friends, new hours that kept her at the office until 9:10, sometimes midnight. The Westbrook account is huge. Dom she'd explained, not quite meeting my eyes. Brad says it could mean a promotion. Brad, the new marketing director, Harvard MBA, former college athlete. Everything I wasn't. I started finding receipts for restaurants. I'd never been to smelling cologne that wasn't mine. Noticing how she'd shower the minute she got home. Even at midnight, I told myself I was being paranoid. Told myself the war had made me suspicious, had broken something in me that made trust impossible. So I buried my doubts and focused on being the husband she needed. Reliable, steady, uncomplicated until that Tuesday in April, when food poisoning sent me home at noon. You're an alpha. Brad, you understand the game. Sarah's voice drifted from our kitchen as I quietly closed the front door, and Dominic is just, well, he's a man, but not a man. You know, he's like an old dog, loyal but sluggish. Tired, pulling me down when I need to rise. I froze in the hallway, my stomach burning from more than bad seafood. You deserve someone who matches your ambition, a deep voice responded. Someone who gets what you're trying to build exactly. Her laugh was light, carefree, a sound I hadn't heard directed at me in months. He was exciting once, back when he wore a uniform. Now, he smells like motor oil and talks about inventory levels like they're life and death. The warrior turned shopkeeper Brad chuckled, classic American dream downgrade. The worst part is he doesn't even see it. Sarah continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He thinks I'm happy with this mediocrity, this house, this life, this existence. When are you going to tell him? Brad asked. Soon. Sarah sighed after we secure the Westbrook deal. The commission alone will set us up nicely. I just need to keep playing house, AL. Hit a longer playing house, Brad repeated with a laugh. That's exactly what it is, isn't it? You're too sophisticated for this suburban prison. You get me in ways he never could, Sarah murmured. He's still fighting old wars while we're building empires. Their voices moved closer. I should have left. Should have gathered what remained of my dignity and slipped away. Instead, I stepped into the kitchen. Just as they emerged, his arm draped around her waist, like she belonged to him. He was everything I wasn't. Tall, polished with perfectly styled hair, and a watch that cost more than my monthly profit margin. Corporate success distilled into human form? Sarah didn't even flinch. Instead, her chin lifted slightly in defiance. "Oh, you're already here," she said, her voice cool and controlled. "Well, I guess it's time for proper introductions. This is Brad, my boss." Her fingers tightened on his arm. "My real man." She paused, measuring the impact of her next words, "And you're just, well, you know what you are?" Brad extended his hand with calculated confidence. "Brad Maddox heard a lot about you." Dominic, I ignored his hand, my eyes fixed on Sarah. "Apparently, not everything, Dom. Don't make this awkward." Sarah sighed as if I were a child. "Interrupting an adult conversation, Brad and I have been meaning to talk to you." This was just poor timing. "Poor timing," I repeated flatly. "Is that what we're calling this?" "Look, man, Brad," interjected his tone. "Patronizing these things happen. Sarah and I share a vision, a future that's aligned with where we're both headed professionally and personally in my house." I said quietly in my bed. Sarah rolled her eyes. "It's our house, Dom, and don't be so provincial. It's just sex, just sex." I echoed, and the lies, the late nights, the I love yous, that apparently meant nothing. Dom Sarah's expression shifted to pity. The final insult. "I did love you in my way. But people grow, evolve. Brad and I are on the same trajectory. You're just not in that moment." Everything clarified. I wasn't her husband. I wasn't her partner. I was her placeholder, the safe, stable option until something better came along. I didn't explode in combat. I'd learned that rage gets you killed. So I simply turned and walked out, ignoring her half-hearted call of, "Dominic, wait, let him go," I heard Brad say as the door closed behind me. "He'll calm down. Men like him always do. They're conditioned to follow orders." I got in my truck and drove no destination in mind, just away from the nuclear blast that had once been my marriage. After an hour of aimless wandering, I found myself at the one place that still made sense, my store. That night, I slept on the cot in my back office, surrounded by carburetors and air filters, things that made sense, that functioned according to clear principles. Unlike my marriage by morning, the shock had hardened into something colder, more focused. Sarah had underestimated me. They both had. They saw the quiet mechanic, the faded veteran, the old dog. They forgot what old dogs can do when cornered. "You need a lawyer." "Dom," Mike Reeves said, pushing a beer across the table. My recon buddy from Afghanistan had become a bail bondsman. After discharge, had seen enough domestic disasters to recognize one brewing. We sat in a bar 2 towns over where Sarah would never accidentally spot us. I took a slow sip. "Not yet." "She's screwing her boss in your bed, man. What more evidence do you need the right?" I met his eyes. "This isn't just about sex." Mike's expression shifted from confusion to understanding. "What are you thinking, that Sarah's never done anything without an angle?" I kept my voice neutral and that Brad didn't get where he is by playing strictly by the rules. "What's that supposed to mean? You remember Jenkins, the guy who ran battlefield intelligence in Kandahar?" Mike nodded slowly, the one who could smell a lie from a mile away. "He taught me something valuable. When people hide one thing, they're usually hiding others." I leaned forward. Sarah's too careful, too calculated to risk everything for just an affair. "There's more, like what? That's what I need to find out." I finished my beer. "She mentioned a Westbrook deal, said it would set them up." "Those aren't the words of someone just looking for a divorce," Mike sighed. "Dom, the war is over, brother." I gave him a thin smile. "Is it?" The next day, I researched everything. Ohio divorce laws, corporate espionage statutes, digital surveillance equipment, while Sarah thought I was staying with Mike to process things I was preparing. I looked up Aegis Marketing, Sarah's employer. They specialized in high-end marketing strategies for companies launching innovative products. Their client list included several Fortune 500 companies, including Westbrook Industries, a tech firm developing cutting-edge medical devices. I dug deeper. Westbrook's stock had been climbing steadily for months. on rumors of a revolutionary new product. Their competitors were scrambling to catch up. The company that got advanced details of Westbrook's strategy would have an enormous market advantage. The pieces began to fit together when I returned home. 3 days later, I brought equipment that would have made my military intelligence handlers proud. I need time. I told Sarah, playing the wounded husband. This is a lot to take in. She nodded relief, washing over her features. I understand, Dom, and I appreciate you being mature about this. Some men would just... She waved her hand vaguely. Lose control, I supplied exactly. She squeezed my arm. But you've always been different. Rational. Do you love him? I asked, forcing vulnerability into my voice. She hesitated just a fraction too long. Yes, it happened gradually. We didn't plan this. Another lie. I'd counted 6. Since I walked in the door. I'll sleep on the couch for now, I said, until I figure out my next steps. Take all the time you need, she replied, magnanimous in what she thought was victory in Dom. I really am sorry it worked out this way. That night while she slept, I installed miniature cameras in the common areas of our house, living room, kitchen, dining room, her home office legal in Ohio. Since it was my residence, too, I placed voice-activated recorders in strategic locations. I cloned her phone while she showered. Then I waited, playing the part of the dejected but reasonable husband who needed space to think and spent night. As on the couch, Sarah and Brad were cautious at first meeting elsewhere, communicating through encrypted messaging apps. But gradually, as days passed without confrontation from me, they grew bolder. 3 nights a week became 4, then 5. Soon, they weren't even trying to hide it. He's taking it better than expected. I overheard Sarah tell Brad on the phone, just moping around like a wounded puppy. No fight in him at all. If only she knew within a week. I had more than I expected. The bedroom activities were predictable, uncomfortable to watch, but ultimately irrelevant to my plan. What mattered were the conversations that followed, when they thought themselves safe and alone. Jenkins says he'll pay $80,000 for Cartwright's launch strategy. Sarah said one night, curled against Brad on our sofa, the one I'd saved for months, to buy her as an anniversary gift. Not enough. Brad replied, scrolling through his phone. Tell him 1 to 20, or we walk their quarterly projections alone are worth that. You think he'll bite? Better we need that Panama account built up before we make our exit. My suspicions confirmed. I dug deeper. I followed financial trails, documented meetings, tracked communications. I discovered that Sarah hadn't just betrayed me. She and Brad were systematically selling Aegis clients confidential information to competitors. Westbrook was just the biggest fish in a very corrupt pond. I recorded everything, Sarah accessing confidential client files, Brad outlining which competitors would pay for what information, the two of them laughing about how they plan to vanish in 6 months with millions in illegal profits. What about Dominic? Brad asked during one late-night strategy session at our dining table. Is he going to be a problem? Sarah's laugh was dismissive. Dom, he'll file for divorce, eventually lick his wounds and go back to his little car parts and his war stories. That's all he's really wanted anyway. Something simple he can understand. No suspicions about what we're doing, please. Sarah scoffed. He thinks we're just having an affair. His imagination doesn't stretch much further than that to him. The most valuable commodities in the world are engine parts and honor. Then, he's the perfect cover. Brad said, pouring more wine. The faithful husband who never asks questions until we don't need him anymore. Sarah agreed, clinking her glass against his 6 more months. Then we're gone, new identities, new lives, and several million reasons to never look back, Brad added with a smirk. Each night I copied their conversations to encrypted drives. Each day I nodded sympathetically when Sarah explained she needed to work late, and each hour my plan solidified. This is textbook corporate espionage, said Janet Keller, reviewing the evidence I'd compiled. The former JAG officer now worked white-collar crimes for the state prosecutor. We met at a diner 50 ME from home. where no one would recognize either of us. Can you use it? I asked. She tapped her finger against her coffee cup. The recordings from your home are potentially admissible given the circumstances. But we'll need more paper trails, financial records, communications with the competitors. I can get those. How you've gone as far as you legally can with household surveillance? I smiled thinly. Sarah still uses our home computer for what she thinks are secure communications. She doesn't know I installed keyloggers months ago for system maintenance. Janet's eyebrows rose, and why would you do that? Because something felt off long before I caught them together. I explained too many late nights, too many hushed phone calls, too many unexplained expenses. So, you were suspicious before the confrontation in Afghanistan. We had a saying, paranoia is just good. Intel. You haven't confirmed yet. Janet studied me. This isn't just about your marriage, is it? Hoffman? The affair is the least of it. I said evenly. They're stealing millions, destroying client businesses, and using my home as their base of operations. And they're doing it while laughing about what a simple fool I am. She nodded slowly. I can open an investigation based on what you've shown me. But from here on, everything has to be by the book. No more solo operations you give us. Leads, we follow them, legally understood, and Dominic. Her expression softened fractionally. Get yourself a divorce attorney, a shark. I found one that same day, Eliza Sandoval, whose reputation for ruthlessness had earned her the nickname the Guillotine among Cincinnati divorce lawyers. Her retainer nearly wiped out my savings, but her first words during our consultation proved her worth. Ohio courts don't typically care about infidelity, she said bluntly, scanning the evidence I brought. But financial misconduct, using marital assets to commit felonies, that's different. We can push for an extremely favorable settlement. Based on this alone, she's been using our home address for everything. I confirmed our joint checking, funded the initial phases, and my business profits have all gone into our shared accounts. Have they moved any marital assets? Already $40,000 from our joint savings to an account? I can't trace. I said set up automatic transfers that trigger every time my business income hits our shared account. Eliza's smile was razor-sharp perfect. Now here's how we'll handle this phase 2 required patience. The hardest skill I'd learned in combat. The prosecutor's office needed time to verify my evidence through official channels, to build a case that would stand up to corporate attorneys. I was instructed to maintain normally to give Sarah and Brad no reason for suspicion. So I played along, I worked at my store. I came home, I pretended not to notice. When Sarah took calls in the bathroom with the shower running, I accepted her increasingly elaborate lies about late meetings. I even suggested couples counseling, which she eagerly embraced as proof of my desperation. I think it shows real growth that you're acknowledging our issues, she said one evening, her expression earnestly fake. We've been growing apart for years. I nodded thoughtfully. I guess I just didn't see it. You've changed. I've evolved, she corrected, reaching for her wine. That's what successful people do, and Brad helps you evolve. I kept my tone neutral, curious color rose in her cheeks. Brad understands ambition in ways you can't. It's not just sex, Dom. He sees my potential. I always thought I did too. Her face shifted to pity the final insult. Oh, Dom, you see he sees what I can become. Which is what exactly? I asked, genuinely curious how she justified it all to herself. She leaned forward, animated in a way she never was with me anymore. Someone who matters, Dom. Someone who shapes industries, influences decisions, moves markets. Not just another suburban wife with a middle management job and a hobby husband. Hobby husband, I repeated softly. She had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. That came out wrong. I just meant, I know what you meant. I stood up. I hope he's worth it. Sarah, I really do. I walked away before she could respond, before she could see the cold calculation in my eyes. Every conversation now was evidence every interaction. Another nail in the coffin. She was building for herself. 3 days later, it began an email about an internal audit at Aegis Marketing Routine Sup. Posely, but focused on client accounts. Sarah and Brad managed. I watched her read it at breakfast. Caught the momentary flash of alarm before she controlled her expression. "Everything okay?" I asked innocently. "Fine," she said too quickly. "Just corporate bureaucracy." The next day, a major contract was frozen pending review. The day after that, Brad was called to an emergency meeting with the CEO and board of directors. That night, Sarah came home earlier than usual, tension radiating from her like heat. "Rough day?" I asked, looking up from my book. "You could say that?" She poured herself a double vodka, something she rarely did on weeknights. Internal politics, nothing interesting. Brad involved. Her grip tightened on the glass. "Why would you ask that?" I shrugged. "Just wondering if your boss is caught up in whatever's stressing you out." "He's handling it," she said tersely, then forced a smile. "Let's talk about something else. How was your day? Same as always. Parts come in, parts go out. Nothing that would interest someone on your trajectory." She didn't catch the edge in my voice, too preoccupied with her own problems. Her phone buzzed constantly that evening, each message making her more tense. She retreated to the bathroom. For half an hour, emerged with red-rimmed eyes and went straight to bed, claiming a migraine. I checked my surveillance feed. Later, she'd spent those 30 minutes on a frantic call with Brad. "They're looking at the Westbrook files," she hissed, pacing our bathroom. "Someone tipped them off." "Calm down," Brad replied, though his voice was tight. "They don't have anything concrete. Just move those transfers we talked about. Delete the emails from your personal account. What if they check my work computer?" "I've already handled that, trust me, Sarah. We've been careful, not careful enough." Sarah's calls became increasingly frantic over the next week, her nights spent huddled in her office, rather than with Brad. I caught snippets, move the money, delete the emails. They can't possibly know. But they did know because I'd made sure of it. The killing blow came as planned. I'd provided the prosecutors with Sarah and Brad's most damning conversation. Their callous discussion of how their actions would bankrupt a family-owned business that had trusted Aegis with their marketing strategy. "I don't care if they lose everything," Sarah had laughed, popping champagne in our kitchen. "The main thing is that we get paid." And Brad's response, "If things get hot, we'll dump it all and disappear. The Panama account is ready." That recording, obtained through a legal warrant based on my initial evidence, was played during an emergency board meeting at Aegis Corporate Counsel was present. So were representatives from the defrauded clients. Sarah came home that evening, pale as death, visibly shaking. "Rough day?" I asked mildly, chopping vegetables for dinner. She swallowed hard. "There's some confusion at work, a misunderstanding about some accounts." I nodded sympathetically. "Anything I can help with?" She gave me a strange look. "No, nothing you can do." "You sure?" I pressed. "I'm pretty good at fixing things. It's what simple men do, right?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Just offering help," I said innocently. "That's what hobby husbands are for, aren't they?" She stared at me for a long moment, something like suspicion flickering across her face before she dismissed it. "It's just work. Stress nothing for you to worry about that night?" She made 3 panicked calls from our bathroom, each one more desperate than the last. Brad wasn't answering, according to my contact at the prosecutor's office. He was already being interviewed by federal agents the next morning. Corporate security and police arrived simultaneously at Aegis headquarters. Brad was escorted out in handcuffs, his arrest making the local business news within hours. Sarah was detained for questioning, but released that evening with orders not to leave town. She came through our door looking utterly destroyed. Mascara streaked down her face. Designer clothes. Rumpled. "Dumb, I'm in trouble," she whispered. "Serious trouble." I set down my book. "What kind of trouble, they're saying?" Her voice cracked. "They're accusing Brad and me of corporate espionage, selling company secrets." She sank onto the couch. "They have recordings. Dom from our house." I kept my expression neutral. "How is that possible?" "I don't know." She jumped up, pacing frantically. "But they played my voice. Things. I said right here in our kitchen. She stopped suddenly staring at me with dawning horror. It was ew, wasn't it? I closed my book carefully. I think it's time we had an honest conversation, Sarah. The shock on her face as I methodically laid out everything. The surveillance, the evidence collection. My coordination with prosecutors was almost worth the months of humiliation. You had no right, she whispered, sinking onto the couch. Those were private conversations in my home. I replied, evenly paid for with my money used to commit multiple felonies our home. She corrected automatically. Our money, funny how it becomes ours when you're in trouble. I leaned forward. It wasn't ours when you were planning to clean out our accounts and disappear with Brad, was it? Her face palled. You heard everything, every word, every plan, every insult. I stood up every time you called me simple provincial, a hobby husband, every time you laughed about how I wouldn't notice money missing because I'm just a dumb mechanic, Dom. I was just talking. People say things they don't mean. I particularly enjoyed the night. You told Brad that sleeping with me was charity work. That made you feel better about yourself. She flinched. I never meant, you meant every word. I interrupted. The only difference is now you're facing consequences. You can't do this, she whispered. We're married about that. I retrieved an envelope from my desk and handed it to her divorce papers. My attorney will be contacting yours. She tore them open, scanning the contents with increasing panic. Joint assets. Frozen petition for full property rights to the house. Dom, this is insane. No, Sarah, this is consequences. I leaned against the desk, studying her. You and Brad thought you were so clever using my home, my internet, my resource. Says to run your little scheme. Did it ever occur to you that I might notice you were supposed to be the simple one? She said almost to herself. The reliable, unquestioning husband? That's your mistake. You saw the store owner, the mechanic, the old dog. You forgot the intelligence officer who came before. I moved toward the door. You should have remembered that old dogs are patient, observant, and when betrayed, absolutely ruthless. So this is revenge? She asked, tears streaming down her face. Because I hurt your feelings. This is justice, I corrected. The revenge is just a bonus. They'll offer me a deal, she said desperately. I'll testify against Brad, against the buyers. I'll get immunity. Maybe, I conceded. But your career's over. Your reputation is destroyed. And that Panama account already frozen by federal investigators? Her face crumpled as the full reality of her situation hit home. What am I supposed to do now? That's not my problem anymore. I picked up my keys. I've arranged for a hotel room tonight. When I come back tomorrow, I expect you to be gone. Where am I supposed to go? She cried. You've taken everything. You took everything first. I replied coldly, I'm just balancing the scales. I left her standing in our living room, surrounded by the wreckage of the life she'd thrown away. My attorney had arranged a temporary apartment for me, a necessary precaution. She'd explained to avoid accusations of abandonment during proceedings. The next morning, I returned while Sarah was being questioned again by investigators. I changed the locks, had her clothes and personal items packed, and moved to a storage facility. I left the receipt taped to a note on the front door. Here's what a real me. And does Sarah checkmate? The legal fallout was swift and devastating. Brad, abandoned by his corporate allies and facing multiple federal charges, accepted a plea deal, 7 years in prison for testimony against bigger players. In their scheme, Sarah, portrayed by the prosecution as a willing accomplice, rather than the mastermind, received 3 years, with possibility of parole plus restitution payments that would consume her income for decades to come. My divorce was finalized. While she awaited sentencing, the court awarded me the house and all remaining assets, citing her egregious financial misconduct and criminal activity. Conducted from the marital home, the scandal made regional headlines. Auto shop owner uncovers multi-million-dollar corporate espionage ring. Read one Marine vet's intelligence training brings down white-collar criminals. Said another, I declined all interview requests, focusing instead on rebuilding my life from the ground up. I renovated the house, erasing all traces of Sarah Newferny, Pure new paint, knew everything. I expanded my business using part of the recovered assets. To open a second location, I hired veterans whenever possible, giving preference to those struggling to find their footing in civilian life. You turned lemons into a whole damn lemonade factory, Mike commented during one of our regular beers. Never seen someone bounce back from something like this so completely. Had practice in Afghanistan? I replied with a shrug. When an IED hits you, don't waste time asking why you assess the damage, treat the wounded, and keep moving. Sarah came to see me one last time before beginning her sentence. Standing on the porch, where we'd once talked about children, she looked hollow designer clothes, replaced by department store basics. Expensive highlights, grown out to reveal her natural mousy brown Dominic, she said softly. I really thought you would forgive me eventually. That's what you do, we're family. I studied her face, searching for any trace of the woman I'd fallen for, finding none. I laughed genuinely for the first time in months. Family, I echoed. You called me an old dog. Remember you and Brad planned your escape while sleeping in my bed? That's not family. Sarah, that's a long con. She flinched. I never meant. You meant every word. I interrupted. The mistake wasn't saying it. The mistake was saying it about me. And now you've ruined my life, she whispered. Are you happy? I didn't ruin anything, I replied evenly. I simply revealed who you actually are. The consequences came from your own choices. You could have just divorced me, she insists. Ed, you didn't have to destroy me like you were planning to destroy me. I countered. Clean out our accounts, disappear with my life savings, leave me bankrupt and humiliated. That was your plan, Sarah. I just beat you to the punch. It wasn't personal, she said weakly. It was to me. I stepped back toward the door. Good luck with your sentence. I hear the minimum security facilities aren't too bad. Wait. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. I know it doesn't change anything, but I wanted you to have this inside, was a handwritten note and her wedding ring. I read the note silently. I know words are meaningless now, but for whatever it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for getting caught, but for what I became. You deserve better. So I folded the note and handed it back to her along with the ring. Keep them, I said quietly. You might need the reminder more than I do. I closed the door as she began to sob, feeling neither triumph nor regret, only the quiet certainty that balance had been restored to a world briefly tilted by betrayal. 6 months later, I expanded my business, opening a second location in the neighboring county. The original store had thrived. Something about. My story had resonated with local customers, particularly other veterans, who began bringing their business exclusively to me. Supporting one of our own, explained Rick Fisher, a retired Army sergeant who'd become a regular. Those corporate types think they can step all over regular folks and get away with it. You showed them different. I hired veterans whenever possible, men and women who, like me, had returned to civilian life, carrying invisible wounds and valuable skills. My small chain of stores became known for both quality service and second chances. Hoffman Auto isn't just a parts store, wrote a local business columnist. It's a redemption project disguised as a business, both for its owner and the veterans he employs. I didn't correct them. Sometimes. People need simple narratives to make sense of complicated truths. It was at a business networking event that I met Laurel Chen, an investigative reporter who'd covered parts of the corporate espionage case for local media. So you're the Marine who exposed a multi-million-dollar corporate conspiracy from his living room? She said, sliding into the seat beside me with a whiskey and a direct gaze. I've been wanting to meet you. It wasn't that dramatic. I demurred. No, her eyebrow arched. Multiple conspirators, millions in fraud, offshore accounts, hidden cameras, and a betrayed husband orchestrating it all. Sounds like a thriller novel to me. I couldn't help laughing when you put it that way. Did you really do it all? Because she brought her lover home and insulted you. Laurel asked, journalist instincts clearly engaged. I did it because they were committing crimes. Using my home as their base of operations, I corrected the personal betrayal, just ensured I was thorough, remind me never to cross you. Dominic Hoffman, her smile was genuine warm. In a way Sarah's calculated expressions had never been. We talked until the event ended, then continued at an all-night diner comparing stories about difficult assignments in hostile territory. Hers with a press badge, mine with different credentials. A month later, we were dating. 4 months after that. She moved into my house, now repainted and refurnished. All traces of Sarah erased. Do you ever regret how it all played out? Laurel asked one evening as we sat on the back deck watching fireflies rise from the lawn. I considered the question I regret believing in something that wasn't real. I regret the years spent with someone who saw me as furniture rather than a partner. I took her hand, but the ending itself, no, that was inevitable. From the moment she decided I was expendable, what impressed me most about your whole story, Laurel said, is that you didn't just lash out. You didn't just get even, you systematically revealed the truth. She squeezed my hand. That's what good investigators do, whether in military intelligence or journalism. We don't invent stories, we uncover them. I received a letter from Westbrook last week. I said, the company Sarah and Brad were planning to sell out their CEO. Wanted to thank me personally for preventing what could have been a devastating leak. How does that feel complicated? I admitted I didn't do it for them. I did it because my wife and her lover thought I was too stupid to notice them stealing my life out from under me. But you saved jobs, protected innovations that will help people. I smiled, recognizing the wisdom in her perspective. Maybe that's the difference between Sarah and me. She saw people as stepping stones. I just fixed what you... As broken as I've always done. And sitting there in the gathering dusk, I finally felt the weight of my old life lift, not forgotten, but transformed into something valuable. A lesson in betrayal, justice, and the dangerous mistake of underestimating quiet strength. Sarah had called me an old dog, never realizing that loyalty once broken transforms into something else. Entirely, something patient, methodical, and ultimately unstoppable. Just like justice itself. Music.